Hello, and welcome to the seventh presentation of the Faculty of Sciences Lunch and Learn series on the menu. My name is Jacqueline Blundell, and I am the Interim Associate Dean of Science for Research and Graduate Studies. And thank you for joining us here today. I would like to begin today's session with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the lands on which Memorial University's campuses are situated are in the traditional territories of diverse Indigenous groups, and we acknowledge, with respect, the histories, cultures of the Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit of the province. We encourage everyone to reflect on the lands where you are located and the Indigenous people for whom these lands are traditional territories. Today's on-the-menu topic is how to find an external partner. We have Dr. Len Zedel, the head of the Department of Physics and Physical Oceanography, and also the former Associate Dean of Research. Dr. Matt Hamilton, an assistant professor in the Department of Computer Science. And Dr. Steve Piercey, a university research professor in the Department of Earth Sciences. All these faculty have unique experiences building successful relationships with external partners on research projects. In this session, they will provide guidance, share tips, and answer questions based on these experiences. The goal of these discussions will be to provide the Faculty of Science researchers with insights on how best to promote and present their expertise to potential partners. We are also joined today by representatives from two units from the Vice President's of Research Office or Portfolio, Dr. Jennifer Stevens, Karen Follett, and John Canning from RGCS. We also have Dr. Paula Mendoca and Kara Strickland from the Technology Transfer and Commercialization Office. As well, I'm hoping Nerj, although I don't see him yet. Hopefully he will join us from Mitacs, a national nonprofit research organization that supports collaborative projects between the academic community and industry. I'm also, they will give a brief description of their roles and answer any questions you may have about how they can support your academic industry partnership or commercialization goals. The Faculty of Science Grant Facilitation team, made up of Dr. Lynn Frizzell, Dr. Jenn Major, and Philip McCallum, are also here to help facilitate the event and provide a survey of some of the main partnership funding opportunities available. Before we get started, I would like to encourage you to keep an eye out for future on-the-menu sessions where we will plan to cover a wide range of important topics we hope will be of interest to graduate students and faculty. We're also interested in your ideas for future events or topics. If you have one, please feel free to submit it in the chat here today, or you can always email us at science@mun.ca. I know these last 2 years, we've all become experts with WebEx. However, I would like to remind you, the attendees, to please turn your mics off, and you can decide what you want to do with your camera. If you're noticing that there's some issues with, freezing, feel free to turn it off. The exceptions, of course, are those of our presenters, hosts, and moderators. Following the presentations, we will take questions. If you have one, please write question in the chat, and we can call on you when it's your turn. And if you wish, you can turn your microphone on and your video, and you can ask. However, if you prefer, you can also write your question in the chat, and we will read it for you. We are recording today's event, and we will post it on the Faculty of Science YouTube channel and on the menu page on the Faculty of Science website. So that's all I have to say. I'll turn now to Dr. Jenn Major to talk about the funding opportunities that depend on partnerships. So Jenn, I don't know if you can share your screen. Oh, yeah, perfect.
Yeah, just make sure that this is working here. So I'm just going to, there we go, briefly go over some of the main opportunities for funding that we've seen for researchers working with external partners. This is not an exhaustive list, but some of kind of the main funding things that we have seen come through. So one of them is through NSERC. So this is the NSERC Alliance program. This is a relatively new program that instead of the old collaboration programs that used to exist. In this, with a partner, you can get matching money from NSERC, either depending on the type of partner you have and the size of that partner, you could get a 1-to-1 match or a 2-to-1 match on the partner contribution. These can be smaller grants from around $20,000 a year to up to very large grants of up to $1 million a year. And the scope just needs to be within NSERC, so it needs to be national or natural sciences and engineering type projects. Also, we often see the Mitacs Accelerate program. Mitacs also has a variety of other programs, but the Accelerate is one that we see very often. So this gives $15,000 to $20,000 per unit. So basically about a semester, and you can have a student or a postdoc who gets funded through this program. And in this case, it's usually half of the money is coming from the sponsor or the partner, and half of it is coming from Mitacs. We've also seen more recently, now there is an NSERC Alliance and Mitacs Accelerate joint program. So in that case, your partner you'll be participating in both at the same time. So it's a joint application. And you can get your partner's money matched by both NSERC and Mitacs, so you can kind of triple the amount of funding that you can get for your project. And another one that I want to talk about was ACOA. So they have a variety of different programs, quite a few. Different from the other programs, they have to have a clear benefit to Atlantic Canada. And most of the ones that we've seen tend to be kind of closer to the development stage compared to the other funding opportunities. And I also want to mention that partners don't have to be just industry partners. They could be government at all different levels, municipal, provincial, or federal. You can also partner with not-for-profits as well. For most of these opportunities, there are no deadlines. You can apply whenever you have a partner and a program ready. But I would mention that since you are working with partners, these do tend to be things that take a couple months to process and to have funds available for spending. And lastly, I just want to briefly mention a funding opportunity that many of you may not think of, and that is SSHRC funding. So one program that might be particularly interesting to those of us in the Faculty of Science are Partnership Engaged grants. They run 4 times a year, and you can get kind of smaller grants between $7,000 and $25,000. And probably of most interest, this would be if you're starting new interdisciplinary work that falls under SSHRC mandates. Also particularly important if you want to form community partnerships and work on knowledge translation. So basically the parts of your grant where you write about impact and societal impact, these might be the types of things that you might want to look into a SSHRC engage. I'll also at this point invite Jennifer and Karen and John to briefly introduce themselves, as they are our GCS experts on these types of programs.
Thanks, Jen. Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Stevens, and Karen Follett and I are the facilitators for strategic research initiatives with RGCS. So our role is to provide support for applications to major and strategic opportunities, including programs such as the NSERC Alliance grants that Jen just mentioned. So we often work alongside and in conjunction with your faculty grant facilitators to provide additional support for these types of applications. And the support that we provide can take a variety of forms. So we can do things, everything from early stage discussions to assistance with specific sections such as the budget, to more comprehensive reviews of your full draft proposal, and this depends on the needs of the researchers involved. So with that, I'll turn it over to John.
Thank you. I'm John Canning. I'm a grants coordinator at our GCS, and my role is focused predominantly on the administration of Mitacs programs. So I'm responsible for reviewing applications, coordinating institutional approval, and submitting applications to Mitacs. I am also responsible for executing agreements with partner organizations, requesting research grant accounts from FAS, and maintenance activities over the life cycle of the research funding, such as amendments, installments, and ethics checks, and so forth.
Great, thanks, John. I don't know if Karen, did you want to say anything, or did Jen?
I'm Karen. Jennifer covered what we do. I'm relatively new to this role, so I've worked with a number of you in my previous role with RGCS, and I'm looking forward to doing more of the facilitator type work on these kinds of programs going forward.
Great. Perfect. Thank you very much, John, Jen, and Karen, for your overview. And I thought I was introducing Nerj from Mitacs, but looks like we have Libby, so that's wonderful. So Libby, take it away.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Yeah, I always start out my Mitacs introduction by mentioning Nerj because there's two of us with Mitacs. So I'm just scanning the screen, and many of you have had the pleasure to work with already. So I'm Director of Business Development with Mitacs here in Newfoundland and Labrador. Nerj is actually team lead, and so two of us work together with Memorial, putting together projects. I guess if you were to think about how we work, he mostly takes care of engineering. I take care of social sciences, humanities, business, and science. So we sort of work together very closely. I think the main thing to mention with Mitacs right now, really as a result of the pandemic, we have some incredible leveraging. I noticed earlier when Jenn Major presented, we're actually doing 3-to-1 matching now with partners. And I think it all speaks to the role that Mitacs is playing with economic recovery. I mean, the pandemic pretty much, it broke a lot of processes. So we're trying to help a lot of companies put that back together again. So what this means is that if you have a partner, they put in 25% on a research project, Mitacs will put in the other 75%. Excuse me, on the NSERC side of things, it used to be when you were doing your NSERC grant, it was either a Mitacs or NSERC. The CEO, the former CEO of Mitacs, is now the head CEO of NSERC. So that's been really great. So we're now able to do matching with NSERC and with Mitacs. So that's good news. So I want to mention we've got the discount, 3-to-1 matching. Oh yeah, and we also have new eligibility on partners. So not-for-profits are eligible, for-profit organizations. We're now able to work as well with municipalities, so with small towns right up to cities. So that's been terrific. We're seeing some projects coming in engineering and as well with Grenfell on the West Coast. Hospitals are now eligible. And on the student, sort of the intern side of things, recent graduates can also do Mitacs now. I think that speaks to the job market, which is a little disrupted right now, again, thanks to the pandemic. And undergrads are also eligible. So throwing a lot out there. The only thing I want to mention as well, we have this other track of funding. So Accelerate is really our flagship for research projects. But we also have I call it anything but research, so business strategy consulting. It's funding to really kind of scope out a project to get to know a partner a bit better. It's the same funding. The funding flows to the intern who takes on the project. There's some money as well for expenses. A lot of professors I'm finding are using this BSI as a way to get to know a partner. And then some of those are actually turning into research projects as well. So we're seeing quite a lot. And MUN is actually leading, thanks to John Canning and the awesome work you're doing, MUN is actually leading all the other universities with BSI. So I'm going to stop talking there. Thank you.
That's great, Libby. Thank you. I know we have certainly seen a lot more Mitacs come across our desk over the last year or so. And I can only imagine what John has seen as well. So it's great that faculty are taking advantage, well, students and faculty are taking advantage of it, the programs. Okay, on to Dr. Mendoza.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Paula is fine. For those of you that I haven't met before, I'm Paula Mendoca. I'm the Director of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, and I'm here with Carew Strickland. She's our Intellectual Property Advisor with the Technology Transfer Commercialization Office, or TTCO. And we're really here to support faculty, students, and staff with their research commercialization activities. So we really work on the applied side of the research. If you have an amazing idea, we always say, just come and talk to us. We are here to help you put a plan in place to move that idea really towards opportunities. And that could mean funding. We have access to proof of concept and market validation funds directly through our office. Partnerships with industry partners, we're there to try to help you bridge those relationships. Licensing, and of course, intellectual property protection. We also provide education on intellectual property. I'm happy to come here again in Carew to talk about intellectual property and how it affects your research. And we also host programming specifically for researchers and their students, so they gain the entrepreneurial skills and competencies to look at their work with a different lens and really identify other avenues for their research outcomes in addition to the typical dissemination through the scientific papers. This program, some of you are familiar with them. We have the Translational R&D program and also the Lab to Market program that is funded. Both of these programs comes with fund. The Lab to Market one is through Mitacs. Thank you, Mitacs. So it's $15,000 that goes directly to the graduate students. And just a quick plug that Lab to Market Oceans is hosted by us, and the applications are open until April 4th. I'll leave a link on the chat. We always have a great representation from the science department, which is fantastic, and we want to continue that. And we'd love to see that applications is open to every university in the country, but having a major representation from Memorial is always great. Carew, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, so I'm Kara, and like Paula said, we're here to identify resources and help create those connections. So if you don't have an idea yet, but you're interested in intellectual property, or if you're interested in working with industry, just connect with us. We're here to support you. And the best way for us to do that is for us to know you and know what your interests are, so that as opportunities arise, we can make sure that we make those connections.
That's great. I think faculty, some do it really well and have great relationships with external partners, and we'll hear from 3 of them now, but it's the faculty who don't know even how to begin. I think this advice to reach out to the TTCO's office is really helpful. So thank you. Okay, so that brings us to our faculty members. Dr. Matt Hamilton, we'll start with you. I don't know if you have a slide, if you can share your screen.
Yeah, no problem.
Great.
Okay, can you see that?
You can, yeah.
Oh, no. Can you see that slideshow there? No.
Yeah, we can see your slide. We also see the second one too, though. So I don't know.
Oh, hang on now. I think I can fix this. Okay, so now you're just seeing the slide?
No, we're seeing both, but it's okay. The main one is larger. Oh, there we go. That's perfect.
Okay, we'll try this anyway. Okay, so yeah, hi, my name is Matthew Hamilton. So I'm a fairly new faculty member in computer science. I just started in May of 2021. So I guess my background before that was in industrial R&D. So I guess this is kind of the expertise or the experience I'm bringing that hopefully can help contribute towards this sort of conversation of how to attract industrial partners. So I worked at a couple of local companies in St. John's area, GRI Simulations and Avalon Holographics. These are small companies doing R&D and kind of pushing the boundaries quite a bit. I also have done some consulting and contracting for some other startups, some local, some not. Some in the US, some in Alberta, right, in energy, oil and gas type applications and environmental applications. So I guess in all these cases, I've sort of been kind of involved on technical R&D, but also in sort of a lot of contact with the entrepreneurs and getting a lot of sort of feedback and thoughts from them on their whole view of R&D and how to go about doing it. And I think that's relevant to this question we have here of industrial academic collaboration. So one other interesting piece of sort of experience I had also was I did set up a successful industrial academic collaboration through this old program, NSERC Engage. I believe it no longer exists. When I was at GRI, and so we did a project with GRI and Mon Process Engineering. So I set it up. I didn't really get to stay around to participate much in it, but all signs that I heard was that it was it looked at as a success. Right, so I guess the idea of finding partners is tough, right? So I tend to think of it as a sales process, right? So it's not really something that the people are trained with for in an academic background, typically, right? But so there's a lot of questions you got to ask to kind of get started. What kind of company is a potential partner, and how do you find these potential partners? And then I guess the next, the most important one is, why should someone partner with you, right? That's going to form the basis of your sales pitch to someone to try and persuade them to work with you. And it's also good, I think, to think of, why would they not want to partner, or try to imagine, I guess, what are the objectives, objections that could come up. So I'll talk about some of the main objections that I've encountered or roadblocks, and so you can kind of think about those and figure out ways to address them up ahead of time before you even talk with someone. So I think the key thing in a sales pitch is communication, right? So some of these business guys I've worked with, they said sales is all about convincing someone to part with their precious money, right? People don't do that easily. It's a tough task, right? People who have made money and entrepreneurs, one thing I've noticed, they're very smart with money, right? So they ask a lot of questions as to what they're going to get out of something. It's startling how good they are with that at this, and that's why they get to where they get when they are successful. So I think thinking about how to communicate the value of your expertise, your R&D capabilities of Mon, and your colleagues is important, right? And I think to do that, you need to kind of think about who your audience is and to target them accordingly, right? So one thing is to listen to what your potential partner, what their problems and aspirations are in their company, right? Listen more than you speak potentially, right? Because you're trying to get convince them to part with their money. So it's good to make sure you work in their world rather than your world. I think another part of that is speaking to them in their language, right? So not to kind of talk to them the way you might talk to a typical academic, right? So just to overgeneralize there, like business people tend to speak in normal kind of language, normal terms, to try to keep things in that realm. In academia, we can obviously get into jargon and fancy language very quickly. So I've been in situations where I've seen academics talking to business people, and you can see sort of the eyes glazing over, the eyes rolling, starting to roll very quickly. So I think finding out, thinking of what the value to their business is, and sort of focusing on that and communicating it very concisely is an important thing to do. Right. So then, just finding a partner in terms of this question, right? What kind of company is a potential partner? This is obviously a huge question. There's, you could spend, a lot of time just combing for different partners in the world, right? There's a lot of potential there. Generally, you want someone who's designed to do R&D and wants to invest there, right? Has money to do so. There's lots of small companies that may aspire to this, but their cash flow is just too small to justify putting cash outside of just keeping their business going. It's understandable, but there's also ways to work there, and I'll talk about that in a second. But generally, well-established companies which have lots of cash to invest in R&D, that's a good target. So another thing to keep in mind there is that there are situations in Canada and in Newfoundland, for example, where companies have actual obligations to spend money on R&D. So offshore energy industry here in NL is one example. Another example is through this Industrial and Technological Benefits Program, ITB program. Long story short, in Canada, defense contractors are required to spend based on the purchases that the Canadian government makes from them, they have an obligation to spend a certain amount equal to that, I think, in Canada as well as part of the sort of the business arrangement. So long story short, these companies have a certain obligation to spend money on in Canada, and I think they get more credit for spending it on R&D. So you can actually look up the obligations that are available online. But I mean, I think finding the people at these companies, large sort of defense companies or other even smaller companies that have had contracts with the government who have these needs, that may match your expertise, is a good step there, right? So that's actually helped me in some of what I've been working on since I've been here. So another thing to look at is if you do have a company, generally what is their existing R&D capability. Companies which have existing R&D capability generally sometimes want to keep that capability in-house. So someone who doesn't have any R&D capability may be more willing to sort of outsource to MON or to a university. Or the other case I found is when they have R&D capability, they just cannot simply fill the void. There's just too much. There's a need there. They can't hire enough employees, so they're outsourcing then to a university that looks very attractive to them, right? So another a tip there is generally in terms of dealing with smaller companies, they may not, like I said, they may not have the cash to spend, but often they have larger companies who they've partnered with or are their customers who they can have a really good relationship with. They can often bring those companies in a situation, and they can, those companies may have, more cash and may also be interested. So that's a good sort of thing to kind of put out there when you're, working with small companies. So, again, why would someone want to partner? Next question. Obviously, all these funding programs, the leverage is great. As Libby said, some of these leverages ratios even go up. Another thing to point out here is that when the companies do spend money, the part that comes from the company actually, I've been told by sort of tax experts, that it's scientific SR&ED is the scientific research credits for companies essentially. So they can also get some of that money back through this tax program. So that's also worth kind of pointing out to companies that with that program and the leveraging. I mean, they do get there would be a very small contribution from the company, and it would be matched by a much larger comparatively contribution from the various government funding sources. In some cases, right, labs that won't have very unique capabilities that cannot be found anywhere else. It would be difficult for companies to build that capability organically in-house themselves. So that's a unique advantage that you can possibly sell to them. Right. Sometimes people don't want to invest in an internal R&D team if they just want to do a small R&D project with one particular outcome. That might be enough for them. Other companies have their own R&D capability, and they're maybe less less excited about outsourcing parts of that because it just kind of disconnects things from their existing team. And then, like I said, the other thing is sometimes it's impossible to grow your internal team just by virtue of there just not being talent available. So companies are willing to start working with the university because then they see it as both creating a HQP pipeline, but also just getting ability to do certain R&D right now in that lab. So the other thing here now is, I said, why would someone not want to partner? So there are lots of objections. Also, you got to be used to seeing these. Like I said, so one I've encountered is that companies are more comfortable doing R&D in-house often, right? They have full control over things. The manager can go down and look at it at any hour of any day and see what's going on. And the other side of it is that the companies do have R&D funding, industrial programs that are available to them. This SR&ED, but there are also other programs where companies can get very similar ratios of R&D covered in-house, right? So we are kind of competing with that, right? So it's something to be aware of, right? Right. There's the other thing I've encountered is that there's a perception that things are slow in academia. People are very skeptical about whether they'll get results done on time, right? So they think that having their own team in-house would be able to control it better and move faster. This sometimes can be true, sometimes not true. It really depends, right? Students have to do courses and so on, so things can be slower, but in some cases, speed is not necessarily as important to other people, right? So generally, someone who's has a very strict timelines, right, they may not be as good of a partner or may not be as good of a fit in this case. So the other thing is IP issues, right? So there are I'm still learning about this as well. There are obviously IP agreements that MON has that that seem to allow for a good exchange of IP with the company. Generally, companies will want to spend money; they want to own the IP. That's a lot of people are very adamant about that, and that does make sense from a business perspective. Another way to do this is to think of things so that does create a roadblock in terms of potentially, academics, we want to ultimately publish the work, right? It's okay if companies exploit it and make money off it, but the students, we want to publish, right? So companies may not like that idea because they may say, oh, you're publishing it now, my competitors can look at that, right? So patents are one way to protect against that. I guess, the other way would be to simply work on things that the company doesn't need to own the IP for, right? Where the results help the company in some way, but only because they already have an existing particular expertise, right, that they can exploit. And then another company seeing those same results in a paper would not benefit as much from it, or in this case where they're just not concerned about that competitive threat. So I think thinking creatively there about, the output and what the output should be and how it can be exploited and sold is key as well. So overall, just basically be patient. I think I found that these things take a lot of time, a lot of meetings. These things can really eat up your time. So don't be discouraged if it doesn't work out right away. And one thing I found, sometimes the least expected meeting, right, can be the most fruitful. You don't really think this is going to be a good opportunity, but that ends up actually, that meeting ends up helping you the most, right? So I think again, just stay positive and patient is always a helpful thing to do here.
That's great. Matt, thank you very much. Very helpful. So next we have Steve Piercey. Steve, you want to?
I'm going to share my screen. Just give me 1 second here. I'll make sure I'm got my screen set up. Okay.
Great. Thanks.
There we go. And I'm going to just make sure. Can you folks see this?
We can.
Okay. That was a great intro, and it's interesting. We did not collude on this, but you're going to hear a lot of the exact same themes and the same advice but from a different perspective. And my perspective is research with industry, and it's a completely biased perspective from my background. And I'll start off and give you an idea of what I do, and then sort of research with partners from a personal perspective. And just some tips from how is it that you can identify what you do that's special, how to get in the room with partners, what to do when you're in the room, and then if you have a project, sort of tips and tricks, what to do and what not to do. And so to simplify what I do, I really work on mountains, magmas, and metals, and I'm really interested in how mountain belts form, how the magmas in those belts form, and then how the metal deposits are associated with those magmas, and how do we do that. I do things like working in the field. For example, this is one of the field sites in the Yukon. I work in places in Newfoundland and bogs on mine sites. This is just a picture here. These are two research partners here. This is one of my students that's embedded with Anaconda Mining, a colleague from the company, and then other colleagues from Leeds. I often work in multidisciplinary teams where the company people are actually partners on the research, involved with the papers, and so on and so forth. So we'll use things in the field, like field sites, but we'll also use things like, for example, previously used drilled diamond drill core and so on from mining properties and so on. And then we'll use that as the backdrop, and then we'll take those samples, bring them home, and we'll play Star Wars with them, like using acids and ion beams and all that. And with the hope at some point we'll get Yoda-like insight into how deposits form and these various processes that we can use to understand how to explore things better. A lot of the work I've done is with partners. Mostly it's anchored on NSERC, but I've had partners for over 20 years, like the Yukon Geological Survey and the Geological Survey of Canada, have funded my research more or less continuously since the late 90s. I have partnerships with using matching funds at the province. And a lot of my partners are evolving, but in many cases, multi-component mining companies. And I know that the work that I do, we have a bit of an advantage because it's in the field of what we call economic geology. So it impacts sort of the metals we need for society. And so right away, you have kind of a receptive audience. If you can do things that are have some way of understanding how these deposits form, how to explore for them, how to do it more efficiently, how to extract things more environmentally sustainably, you often have a willing audience. So I'm talking from this perspective, and I completely know that this is coming from a background of of privilege in having that potential audience that's interested in the research. Okay, so that's what I do, and that'll frame sort of where I'm going to. And I think when it comes to research, one of the things that young researchers and seasoned researchers need to think about is that what is it that you do that's unique and special and that may have value? So there's an awful lot of intellectual talent at Memorial University and other universities, both in the graduate student population and faculty and staff. And I think some of the things that we sometimes undersell is the skill sets and knowledge that we have that might be utilized by industry or government partners to further mutual research and commercial interest. So I've spent a lot of my life working on things that are completely pure research, like how do bacteria influence how an ore deposit forms or how do mountain belts form, while being funded by industry to answer questions that are much more targeted. And so I think one of the things that we can often do is expand our thinking of what we do. The other part that we do really well is we're in the business of training people. And so we often have unique skills, knowledge, and training that can be used to improve the quality of work that's being done by partners and value added in their day-to-day operations. So a lot of the work I do when I partner with companies is actually helping improve the field skills of many of their young geoscience staff and new approaches to solving problems and so on. And so these are things that we do at universities that are our bread and butter that have potential use outside. And we need to think from that framework. We also should think about who are the potential users of the research and development that we do. Are there people outside of our immediate research community? And this can help us try and identify potential partners. And once you identify them, you need to really get in the room and get an audience. And I'm going to go to that one. How do you get in the room? Well, that's often challenging, and it takes time. The answers aren't simple. It's really about networking, and I'll go through some of these anecdotes, but one of the best ways to do this is volunteering and actually getting involved with scientific, industry, and community organizations. So my first industry project started in the year 2000 when I was asked to volunteer on a scientific society, and I met a certain person on that society. And 5 years later, they funded a research program because we had developed a relationship over that volunteer event. Sometimes just being involved with some kind of knowledge industry, community groups and so on can really help expand your network. Visibility. Anytime you have a chance to give a talk to someone, community groups, non-conventional audiences, and industry groups, it's really important. And I think Matthew's point about distilling our research to essentials for non-experts, speaking in clear language and not jargon-rich language. Why is this relevant? Effectively, what we need to think about is, as taxpayers, why should a taxpayer care about the money? And then second of all, why should a shareholder invest in your research, and how does it bring value to a partner? That's really how many of the people that I partner with think. Social media is great. One of the problems with that is that it's an echo chamber, and many of the people that you're trying to interact with will not be in that echo chamber. So it's good to amplify it, but we're often talking to ourselves in those frameworks. One of the other parts of socializing is amazing how many, and that comes back to the volunteering and so on, but go to industry and other events and meet people. And I give the example, it's amazing what happens thought up late at night while drawing on a napkin. And many of the projects I've had start came from just going to some kind of networking event and meeting someone and having a random conversation. And that's led to graduate student projects and others. And I think the other part is going back to conventional stuff like picking up the phone and phoning people. Email is just a nightmare, and it's just when you put an email in someone's inbox, it's just another demand. And so phone calls often work, and talking to someone on the phone. And there's other things. Sometimes you can give advice in staff training, knowledge transfer, just based on your expertise for free, and it may or may not lead to somewhere, but it shows goodwill. Sometimes it's old people you went to school with that had different pathways than you, reaching out to those folks, former students. I have a project now that came out of a student that I served on their committee in 2003, and they went on to work in the financial sector and notified someone in a company that they should talk to me at Memorial because they had a project in Newfoundland. But it came out of a relationship from being on a supervisory committee many years ago. And the other part is find successful peers and ask them how they do it, and get mentors to open doors for you. And I put a bunch of people down here that were really important in my life, my PhD supervisor and then two colleagues at Laurentian, and they were really important for me in the sense that they taught me how to do things like collaborate with a wide variety of partners, but also how to pitch things to industry and how to deliver to industry, as well as how to write the proposals well to actually. And so these kind of things are part of what I think we should be doing internally in the university as well, because a lot of the things that Matthew talked about, and I'm sure that Lynn will talk about, they're transcending discipline. And so there's lots of opportunities for this kind of cross fertilization and mentorship. Okay, so let's say that you get in the room. What do you do when you're in the room? Listen. And this is a really important thing because, again, you're trying to get people to give you money. And I often ask a few simple questions and sit back and listen. What are the fundamental R&D problems that a company is trying to solve? In many cases, companies are extremely busy with the day-to-day demands of staff and management. And often an in for research is what information does a company need that they cannot obtain right now, but they may need in the future. For example, in 2 to 5 years. And you'll notice here, this is MSc and PhD timescales. So many companies are thinking both immediate problems that have to be solved, and that can be done within this framework. But there's also the longer term knowledge that they may need to improve their successes and efficiencies later on. And this is where graduate student projects can really fit in. And I come back again to what kind of training and upgrading does the staff need? That's where a research team can actually add a lot of value. Leveraging, again, I need to tell a shareholder, is what my colleagues say, of why we're giving money to you. And they say, well, if you put $1 in, you may get $2 or $3 in leveraging. You get trained HQP. You'll get an opportunity to have your staff interacting with some of the best people in the world, et cetera, et cetera. And another thing is human connections are really important in developing personal relationships. A lot of the people I'm working with now are repeat colleagues that I've worked with at multiple companies over many years. And the other part is that there's lots of really talented people in universities, but they also exist outside of the institution. And you need to be humble because you probably are not the smartest guy in the room or the smartest person in the room all the time. And ego is the quickest way to see the door slam in your face. And I've learned an awful lot from people that, that don't have a lot of degrees and so on and are not researchers, but have the ability to solve problems in different ways. And I think it's really important for us to be thinking of this as a two-way street where we're going to learn from a partner and vice versa. Okay. Say you have a potential partner interested. I think it's really important to develop research on shared interest and make it a true partnership. They're not a bank. They want something out of it and you want something out of it. And it's really important that there is a joint interest in where things are going and there is a true partnership. I think what's really important is clarity of expectations. Set up realistic expectations for both partners. What is it that can and cannot be done? What is expected by the partner? What do you want out of it? A critical thing is who owns what IP and having that clearly sorted out, and what are the deliverables. And within this framework, students are really important to be protected. They always have to be protected in first priority. So have realistic expectations of what can be delivered in student-centered research projects. And the reason for that is twofold. If a company is disappointed, that's not going to help you in the longer term. Second of all, it also hampers the potential opportunities for student employment afterwards if a company or some other partner is not happy with the outcomes of work. It's inevitable we have things that happen, but in most cases we need to really work on making sure that the students have positive experiences, are protected, and have the opportunity to be successful long term. And this is one that I love: undersell and over deliver. I use this one all the time. It's like I never ever say anything that I cannot accomplish within a project, because otherwise I'm not going to get a repeat customer. Okay, what not to do. Money matters. But if you're not interested in the science or problems, don't do the research. It's surprising how many people will say, money, let's do it. And they're not really interested in the problems. That'll become a millstone and it will not be an enjoyable experience for anyone. Unrealistic expectations. Don't set up expectations that cannot be accomplished. Deliver. You have to deliver on projects. Projects may change, but they need to be described mutually between partners. HQP is really important that you pick your HQP carefully. They need to fit with the partner, and there has to be a positive relationship between the HQP such that they are going to thrive in that environment, but also protect them. Just because you might like a student they might not necessarily fit with a certain partner. And so you really need to know the HQP you're bringing into a program, but also the partner itself. Communication is really important, regular communication. And I think it's really important to remember that many of these groups that I deal with are publicly traded on the stock exchange, and reputation is a really important thing. And we have to be really careful about reputation loss of a partner as well as ourselves. And this is really important in the days of social media, where public release of research results and discussing research on social media, including that of HQP, really had to have a plan for that to make sure that information that's confidential or strategic and so on is not being released. I have a rule in my group that anything that's going to be released in the public has to go through me first, and I approve it. It sounds corporate, but it's important if we want to make sure clarity of messaging, but also protection of various groups. And I like this. This is one of my colleagues has used this with before, but it's taken from Kevin Plank. And reputation is gained in drops and lost in buckets, both for a partner, but also for us. And so if we do things well, you build that reputation and you have repeat partnerships and opportunities, but it doesn't take much to actually soil that. And that's not good for us, for other colleagues in the institution and so on. So it's really important to make sure that we are careful with the way that we do things. So I'm going to leave it there, and that's sort of my biased perspective on things, and hopefully there's some use, and we'll take questions later.
Great, thanks, Steve. And to, I guess, end us from the presentation side of things is Dr. Zedel.
Okay, I'm just trying to make this work effectively. And I'm not share. Did that work for you guys?
It does, yeah.
Oh my God, I'm impressed. Yeah, didn't you open this up by saying we're all getting pretty good at WebEx? So I think my experiences are the same and different to what you've heard. I think I've taken the whole experience of finding partners as a little bit, I don't know, it's been a journey with kind of serendipity. That's the word that comes up. And I guess I'll explain how that's come about. And I see in what our other presenters have said, oh yeah, okay, yeah, that kind of jives with what I've done. Hang on there. Okay, so just by way of my background, I'm originally from BC, kind of grew up in the bush. Doesn't really matter so much here. I did a BSc at UVic in a co-op program, and I think that's really important because I worked in industry with ESCO Resources. I worked with government, with Fisheries and Oceans, BC Highways of all things, Department of National Defense, and a company called Seachem Oceanography. So through that process, I was kind of learning about and it was primarily the oceanography ecosystem in BC. So I went on, did a master's at UVic in physics, working with Doppler sonar. So there's kind of like an ocean acoustics kind of connection there. And after I finished my master's, I needed a year off. So I got a job with CSIRO in Tasmania. That's basically the National Research Council of Australia. And I installed a, wait for it, Doppler sonar system on a ship they had. That instrument was made by a company called RD Instruments out of San Diego. So I got to know that company really well. Went back to UBC, did a PhD in physical oceanography, acoustic observations of near surface processes. All the time I'm kind of living in that ocean ecosystem of British Columbia. So I started making, see, these are the partners I've worked with over the years, and I like, as I make them a list, it didn't kind of work. But I realized looking at them, they're all related in some way. They connect. So finished my master's. I'm learning about the ecosystem in BC, and I make a connection with ASL, Environmental Sciences. I didn't work with them, but I just was familiar with the people. I talked to them from time to time, and so I just parked that there because we didn't do any work together, but I just knew what they were doing. It's a little bit like Steve's reference to volunteer. I went to CSRO, worked on the ship, and got to know RD Instruments quite well because this was one of their first instruments. So I got to know that community. Went back to UBC, Oceanography, did my degree. And then I got a postdoc at Memorial, of all places, as a research associate, postdoc. But while I'm there, I'm doing contracts with, primarily RDI, but also with Sontech. And so there's another link that's formed working through that. So Sontech was a spin-off company from RDI, still based out of San Diego. Sontech eventually split up into Sontech and Nortech in Norway. And then I ended up working with people in Nortech. Along the way, there was a link with PRNL. PRNL is kind of like a funding agent and an industry association, but that was with Chevron Canada locally. Then I had some opportunities in just kind of a wholly different line, but still leveraging off of experience with RD Instruments, Luna C Solutions, kind of an environmental consulting group. And between my experience with RDI and Luna C, that kind of leads into a project I'm involved with right now with ASL at long last, after like, think about it, 30 years. And I put the arrow from RDI in both directions because it's possible we might actually link ASL and RDI and work together in the future. So these are these linkages in space and time, if you will, but associated with these linkages, there's people. So people are critical. I mean, they make up the community. And so, I don't know if the arrow shows or not. Been working in Australia, I met Fran Rowe, Kent Dines, the R&D of RDI, Lee Gordon. I ended up doing some projects with Lee Gordon. And that led me to, I was introduced to Atlee Lorman and Ramon Cabrera. That got me to Sontech and Nortech, Atlee Lorman, Eric Siegel. This little sidebar to PRNL, that was facilitated really through Ray Gozine to Mark McLeod, who at that time was, I was like, fairly high up in Chevron. So like linkages there, Greg Trouse, Dave Lemon and Dave Fissel, originally from ASL. Now I'm working with Jan Bermans and Steve Pierce. So, it's people. Funding agencies. Most of these projects, most of this activity was somehow funded by government support. When I was working with RDI, there were a series of programs called the Small Business Innovative Research Grants, and we got several of those. They were really nice because the first stage, they were fully funded by the government, and I'll get back to that in a bit. Office of Naval Research, that's sort of a thing you can get when you're in oceanography. Atlantic Innovation Fund, another source of funding that was tied in with Nortech. And now NSERC Alliance. So, there's the people, there's these different companies, but they all link together somehow, and the funding is critical. So I just kind of like, I had to think, how did this all come together? And for me, it's a lot of serendipity. It's not so much, I mean, Steve was talking about pitching this, but for me, it's more like parallel, lines that I'm being parallel. I meet these people at conferences, or I talk to them just incidentally, and I find out what they're doing, and I'm doing stuff like that too. Maybe we should get together, or it just sort of happens almost by luck. And it's not so often, even though I've had a lot of involvement with industry, I haven't so often been going out and marketing it. So really, I guess what I'm saying, and what I've been hearing too, what other people said, networking is absolutely critical. You've got to go to conferences, professional activities, and your reputation is important too, so people know who you are. Government funding is critical. Like the SBIR was great because there was no financial commitment by industry at the first stage. NSERC Alliance is a close model because of the high degree of leveraging. Small companies critically are going to be looking for return in 3 to 5 years. So longer than that, and they're just not going to get involved because they're not going to, it just won't, they can't afford it. IP concerns, or you have to keep that in your mind. they're much tighter than they used to be. They used to be rather free and easy. And student concerns, student IP is important. Timeliness for degrees and opportunities for the students are significant. So those are my take-home messages. And I guess we're running tight on time, so I'll finish off there.
Thanks, Len. And thank you to Matt and Steve as well. They were great points that you've raised, some similarities, but certainly some variety in your experiences. Does anyone have any questions? You can just type it in the chat or you can speak up. I actually have one question. So oddly enough, a company contacted me out of the blue and asked if I would be interested in meeting to discuss some potential collaborations. I have never had that experience happen to me, and I've never worked with a partner. What is my first step? Who do I meet with them first? Is it best to speak to the TTCO's office? Is it best to speak to what do I do?
It's really up to you. Like if you want to meet with them on your own, you can, but if you want us to help, we're there to help as well. So we can help with those initial engagements if you want, or if you want to come and talk to us afterwards with questions, if you have questions or any guidance, we can help with that as well.
I tend to open the door and go for a coffee and just listen and see where it goes, right? Like, and you know, and then you can decide which pathway you need to go down, right? But keep it simple.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Yeah, I was so surprised. Anyone would be interested in anything, any expertise that I have.
But Jacqueline, that comes back to my comment about your reputation is out there. You know, even though you don't know it, you're broadcasting it all the time. You know, and the community is watching, and obviously these people noticed you and said, "Hey, this faculty member has something we could benefit from, or we are interested in."
I guess what I would love to have happen is to somehow broadcast even louder for the faculty or the researchers as a whole, their expertise so that we can attract more companies like that. Libby? Yeah.
Sorry, that's a gigantic hand. Yeah, just on that point, this is where Mitacs can help as well. So oftentimes, so it's interesting when Nurch and I are talking to professors and we're talking to industry, you know, a lot of times the companies they're a little bit intimidated, you know, the university is the building and they don't have a connection. So oftentimes, you know, we do that matchmaking where we talk to the company and say, look, how about this, you know, professor so-and-so? So, you know, certainly we're very interested in helping to make those connections as well. Sometimes we just chat with the professor, grab a coffee and just say, let's just brainstorm together. And then Nurj and I actually make the calls or send the emails. And then we just set up these, you know, sort of brief introductory sessions. And usually a connection does come out of it. So we're happy to help if we can.
Any other questions that people may have? I know it's only 1 minute left and we got lots of great tips.
I was just wondering who would be the first person for me to contact about looking for municipal partners.
I think I can definitely help on that front. Mitacs very recently is able to work with municipalities, and we're also doing a lot of work with the FCM, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. So that might also be a way for us to help. So I'd be happy to do a follow-up with you.
Okay, what's your email or phone number?
Oh yeah, I can. Is there a chat? I can pop it in the chat. Yeah, lcarew@mitacs.ca. If I could find the chat here.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any before we conclude today?
I'd also just give a quick plug for the Dean's Office as grant facilitators. We might not know how to get everything for you, but if you are thinking of doing something, please reach out to us and we'll connect you to the TTCO and we'll connect you to other people that we know that have gone through something similar. So let us know, and if we don't know the answer, we'll reach out and find out the answer.
So what is I heard you said TTCL? Is that what it is?
Yeah, that would be Kara and Paula, the technology transfer. What's the C? I forgot the C.
Technology
Commercialization.
transfer, commercialization office.
Commercialization.
An office, yes. We need to change that. It's very long. But yes, we normally don't work with municipalities where we can potentially help, but our role is really on the industry partner side. And in anything intellectual property.
Okay.
Great. Well, thanks again for putting together your presentations, and thanks for the attendees. And hopefully this will spur some people to think about possible industry partners that they'd like to engage with. And obviously those who are being really successful with engaging, please pass on your, or if you know faculty who might benefit, please pass their information on as well. And thanks, Libby, for including your email. And again, I echo what Jen said. If there's anything we can do to help, we certainly will do that. Great. Thank you. Have a nice day. Enjoy the rest of the week.